Hello everyone and welcome back to the Ryan Retro channel. In today's video we're going to be doing a full review of the Konkr Pocket Fit, and it's the best handheld I've ever tested on this channel. When you first take it out of the box, you're going to notice the lovely design. There are a few different colorways available. I have here the Dragon Yellow. It's been affectionately referred to as Dragon Cheese online, and if you're curious what kind of cheese it looks like, it's somewhere between double Gloucester and cheddar. And it tastes like... regret. The Konkr looks like you took a Retroid Pocket 5, reversed the analog stick and D-pad positions, and smushed it into some yellow clay, forming a grip around it. Considering it has what is basically a built-in grip, this is a very comfortable device. In fact, it is the most comfortable handheld I've ever used by some distance. So if we put the Retroid Pocket 5 into its own grip case, you can see how they're actually quite comparable in size now, lining up almost identically. Let's also take this opportunity now to compare it with some other handhelds to see how big it is. So kicking things off, we have the Retroid Pocket 5, the Konkr Pocket Fit, my LCD Nintendo Switch 1, the Odin 2 Portal, and then my LCD Steam Deck. So as you can see, there's a wide variety of sizes here, but if we were to place the Konkr Pocket Fit in terms of power, it wouldn't be here. It would actually slot into here. It is more powerful than the Odin 2 Portal. And while a lot of people will always say, just get a Steam Deck, you can see the difference in size here and how much more pocketable the Pocket Fit is over the Steam Deck, which I guess is why they didn't call it the Steam Pocket. If we look at them from a top-down view now, you'll see the Konkr is quite a bit chunkier than the Nintendo Switch and the Odin 2 Portal, and I find that really helps with the ergonomics. For me, the Switch and the Portal are just far too thin and flat for me to get a good grip on. I find the Konkr to be easily the most comfortable of anything on the table here. When it comes to cases, I've shown on the channel before that a pencil case is actually a pretty perfect case for a Retroid Pocket 5, but if you attach the grip to the Retroid Pocket 5, a Nintendo Switch Lite case then becomes a pretty perfect case. It also turns out that being a similar size to the Konkr Pocket Fit, the Konkr Pocket Fit fits so perfectly in a Nintendo Switch Lite case. It seems like it was made for it. We can even put the little straps on top, and this just seems like it was made for this device. So if you were looking for a non-official case for your Konkr Pocket Fit, I would highly recommend getting a Nintendo Switch Lite case, which are readily available and really cheap. This is just perfect. And just for comparison's sake, here is my Nintendo Switch case, and you can see it's far too big for the Konkr. So that should put into perspective the size of the device. Let's now take a look at the buttons of the device. The buttons feel absolutely lovely, and they're not too loud, which is something I don't like about Retroid and AYN buttons. The buttons on the Retroid Pocket 5 are very nice, but they're very clacky. They do still have some volume to them, but they don't have that high-pitched clack. The D-pad is the nicest on any device I've used so far, as are the triggers. These are so nice and smooth. They do also have these switches, so you can change them to being a click, like on a Nintendo Switch, that limits the movement, or you can bring that switch back down and get the full range of smooth motion. These have been a joy to use so far. We have the usual volume buttons and power button, except on the Konkr Pocket Fit, this power button is also a fingerprint scanner on all variants except for the base variant, where they've omitted the fingerprint scanner to save a bit of money. So if you're using the Konkr Pocket Fit in a shared household, maybe you have kids and you don't want them to be gaming all the time, you can set up a fingerprint lock to bypass the passcode by just pressing your fingerprint on the power button and it will unlock the device. Analog sticks that come with this device are really small, and in my initial first test video, I was quite skeptical and worried about them. Now I did find out you can freely just take them off and replace them easily with AYN or Retroid stick caps. So I could put on this stick cap from my Retroid Pocket 5, or I could put this larger stick cap from my Odin 2 Portal. They all fit perfectly and they work really well. So I did test all the different stick caps. I know a lot of people like these large ones from the Odin 2 Portal, and after a lot of testing, I like the original ones the best. I never thought that was going to happen, but I can see why Ayaneo settled on them for this particular device, because in practice when playing games, they are just very comfortable. But if you don't like them, you can freely change them from ones from other manufacturers, and I believe YuGiOh are going to provide some extra larger ones in the box once you get yours delivered. Mine's a pre-release unit, so I didn't get any extras, but I heard they are shipping slightly larger ones with the retail units. Now, if you saw my first impressions video, one of the things that drove me crazy was that these buttons were not mapped to start and select. These buttons were mapped to start and select. This button was mapped to change the profile of the power and fan mode, and this button didn't seem to do anything. Now, thankfully, it's an easy change. A button I do really like is this Conker button that brings up the side panel. By far the best side panel I've seen on any handheld I've used so far. And if you come to Controller, and then just scroll down to where it says ABXY, we have the SEST/mode turbo option. SEST is select and start, and mode and turbo is what the buttons were doing before, but I want them to be select and start. So we just tap over here, and you can just choose between two different options. Normal key mapping is how it comes out of the box, but I want it to swap to be start and select. So just by changing this one setting, we now have start and select working in a way that feels natural. There are actually a lot of extra buttons on this device, so many so that I've still not found a use for many of them. With this now being start and select, I've gone into the settings and I've customized some of the other ones, so that now this button here freely changes between Xbox and Nintendo button layouts when I'm playing Switch or Windows games. I can just press this one button and it flips A and B immediately. No need to change anything inside the emulator settings. I've set this little button over here to be a little mute switch, which I like on all of my handhelds if I need to be quiet quickly and pretend I'm working on something. This button does absolutely nothing. I haven't found a need for it. And these tiny little extra trigger buttons up here, the left one brings up the recent app switcher, and the right one takes you back to the home screen. So even after mapping a few things, I still have this button which is extra, and two buttons on the back which are also extra. There are just so many buttons on here that you could map to be whatever you want. I will show you how I've mapped these in a game later, but let's just finish our tour of the outside of the device with a headphone jack, which I've not used yet because I threw all my wired headphones away years ago. And probably the thing I dislike the most about this device, which is this SD card tray. It's probably the most sophisticated SD card tray I've seen on a device so far, in that you pop this little button here to lever it up, and then you can slide it up and it makes these great ASMR sounds. But it is a little bit tricky to get the SD card out because it's so close to the edge of the wall here. You really need to try to pry it out. But that's not the reason I don't like it. The reason I don't like it is that it's so easy to pop this tray open. And the way that I hold handhelds is by wrapping my fingers around the bumps on the back like this, and I then prop it up with my pinky fingers like this. This is what feels comfortable to me, and it's the way I hold all of my handhelds. The problem is this pinky finger is right on that lever, and I find myself constantly slightly opening it like this. Now, this isn't a huge deal or a big problem, but I just constantly see this open like that and have to just close it again. Of course, this is not a deal breaker, it's absolutely fine. It's just a slight annoyance when I'm constantly playing and think, why is the door open? About 10 times a day. So I think that's very much a me problem. I'm actually tempted to put a little bit of sellotape on this, but that is just a massive nitpick I did want to point out. Let's now move down to the speakers, which are front-firing speakers, and they sound excellent. If you follow my channel before, you'll know that I've put a speaker fix on the Retroid Pocket 5, which also makes it sound really good. So let's do a little side-by-side comparison on my favorite speaker test game, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Megadrive. The Konkr Pocket Fit just sounds so rich and full compared to the Retroid Pocket 5. It really just is on another level when it comes to the sound. There is also a built-in equalizer in the settings, but I haven't felt the need to tinker with that. This is also a good opportunity to test out the deep blacks of the screen, because the Conker isn't OLED like the Retroid Pocket 5 is, and a lot of people really love OLED, myself included. I think OLED just looks incredible. It's so contrasty, and the blacks truly turn off, whereas on an LCD panel like this, they are lit up black. But I have to say, I've not used an LCD like this before that actually just kind of looks like an OLED. I'm not sure how it's going to come across on the camera compared to the naked eye, but one thing that sets OLEDs like the Retroid Pocket 5 apart is how blacks just completely melt and disappear into the frame of the body. You can barely even see where the screen ends and the body begins. I thought that was going to be starkly different on the Conker, and it just isn't. There is a slight difference if I really look at it closely side by side, but the Conker has that same ability to just seamlessly blend the screen into the body. It's almost invisible like an OLED, so all the benefits we're used to getting from an OLED really aren't being lost here. Now, some people really are sticklers for OLED. I am quite an OLED snob as well, so I understand people who really want to get an OLED, but there really isn't much difference here. When you put them side by side like this, there is more contrast and saturation on the Retroid Pocket 5, but I don't think it looks necessarily better than the Conker does. I think if we added some more saturation to this screen, they would look almost identical. But let's see how they look outside in broad daylight, which is where we're going to see the biggest difference between these panels. Unfortunately, my plan to test them outside in broad daylight didn't really work out, as it's been nothing but clouds and rain all week long. So instead, let's just look at the maximum brightness levels, and you'll see that the brightness of the Odin 2 Portal is far brighter than that of the Retroid Pocket 5 or the Konkr Pocket Fit. But as a reference, here is my TrimUI brick, which also just ran out of battery right when I started to film, and this is a device I use outside in broad daylight all the time. So as you'll see, while the Konkr Pocket Fit is not nearly as bright as the Odin 2 Portal, it's more than bright enough for daylight use. And now if we take a look at them in total darkness on their lowest brightness setting, once again you'll see the Conker doesn't get nearly as dark as the OLED panels. But being an Android device, this is not really an issue, as we can just install a dimming application like this one to really lower the brightness down. So side by side, you might notice some difference between the panels, and you might think one looks even a lot better than the other. All I can say is that when you're using one device and not sticking it side by side with another one, this panel is fantastic and more than good enough for me in every way. And that's before we even consider that it's got 144 Hz, making it incredible for so many situations where others are more limited. Another thing worth talking about is PWM flicker, which is something that affects some people and can give them headaches or make them feel a bit sick. It doesn't affect me personally, but I have seen a lot of comments about it. The Odin 2 Portal suffers from this a little bit. You can see those flickering lines going through the screen. My phone is apparently terrible for this. The Retroid Pocket 5 thankfully doesn't suffer from this, and this is one area where the Conker actually has a benefit. Being LCD and not OLED, it shouldn't give any PWM flickering issues. So if you are sensitive to PWM flicker, this is one scenario where a non-OLED actually might be better for you. There is also an intake fan here on the back that will suck in air, and a really powerful exhaust fan on the back that is just so powerful. It's definitely going to get the most out of this chip. The final part of hardware to talk about on the outside of this device is of course the USB-C port, which can charge this up very quickly. My Anker power bank here is charging this at speeds of sometimes over 50 watts. By comparison, the Odin 2 Portal is capped at 26 watts. We're also able to use this USB-C port to output 4K up to 144 Hz. I have a 2K 240 Hz monitor, and I'm able to output 2K 180 Hz from this to that monitor with only one cable. AYANEO have announced they're upgrading all pre-orders of the Konkr Pocket Fit from an 8000 mAh battery to 8400, and I can confirm my unit does have an 8400 mAh battery inside. So how powerful is this G3 Gen 3 chip? Well, the Wildlife Extreme 3D Mark test gave it a score of 5,000 points, which is a bit less than the 5,700 of my Snapdragon 8 Elite phone, but quite a lot more than the 3,700 from the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 device, the Odin 2 Portal over here. So the power should be quite a bit more than an Odin 2 device, but less than an Elite. And do bear in mind that this is not a gaming device, this is just a phone. So a Snapdragon 8 Elite Konkr Pocket Fit with the built-in cooling and the optimizations will probably score quite a bit higher than this again. So let's talk software. When you turn on the device for the first time, you will be in the Aya home screen, which looks like this, a kind of traditional Android launcher. It's not bad. Some apps change the color of the background when you hover over them. Most don't. I don't really know what's going on, but it's not that bad. You can press in the right stick to mess around with it a little bit, change the icon style, change the layout style. There is some customization, and it's by no means a bad launcher. But if you have one you like already, like Nova Launcher or I like Smart Launcher, then you're probably best off just sticking with the one you already like. I like Smart Launcher because it automatically categorizes your apps into settings, utilities, games, etc. And if you buy it for a few dollars, you could even customize it more with your own icons, and I just think it works really smoothly. But the Aya Home is by no means a bad little launcher. But when you're ready to launch some games, you're going to want to jump into Aya Space. This is Aya Neo's dedicated gaming front end for launching all of your games. I've spent some time setting mine up, and you can see now mine looks pretty nice. I've got all the game art loading in quickly. It's smooth, it works with touch control, it works nice with the built-in controls. This is a really lovely launcher. It's possibly even the nicest launcher I've ever used. You can jump back into games you played recently, you can add games to favorite and make your own playlists like this Pokemon one I've got here. It's got a nice search built in, so you can search, for example, golf games, and then find all your golf games to jump into. It's a lovely launcher, but it's quite confusing to set up. When you first get your device and put your games in, you're going to have no artwork for anything. So I went looking through the Aya Neo Discord and Reddit, and I found terrifying looking screenshots like this, like I was trying to crack the Enigma code. And I still don't really know how to set this up perfectly, but I will just let you know how I got it into this state I have right now. And that is to click in the right stick to bring up the layout options. Make sure you're in grid mode and background style. Then what you need to do is make sure you have a folder with your ROMs called images. And the image needs to have the exact same name as the game itself. The problem is Aya Space doesn't have its own built-in scraper. So you're going to have to go scrape games on your computer or another app like ESDE. This is ESDE, and I have all of my games already scraped and set up to use in the ESDE app. So I wanted to grab the box art from here and move it over to Aya Space. So what you need to do is come into your file manager, find your ESDE folder, mine is on my SD card, come to downloaded media, which will be all of your pictures you've downloaded and scraped in ESDE. Go to the system you want to add your box art for, let's just say Wii for example. And now I have all my different kinds of images from ESDE. I've got 3D boxes, the back cover, the front cover, physical media. I've got lots of different art scraped from ESDE. Let's say I want to take the front covers and put those into Aya Space. All I need to do is grab this covers folder and copy it right where my ROMs are. Put it right next to the ROMs. So I'll copy this, I'll come to my ROMs folder and come down to Wii. Then I just need to paste that covers folder in here. Now the last thing to do is to rename the covers folder to images. So now I have all of my games and an images folder with all of the game images with the same file name. Then it will show up fine inside Aya Space. Moving this folder over for every system was quite laborious, so I got ChatGPT to write a script and just do it all for me. So once you go through and do that for all of your gaming systems, you'll have all of your artwork set up like this and you'll be good to go. In order to add artwork for box and clear logo, we'll need a different folder, but I'm not sure what that folder name is just yet, and not being able to scrape directly inside Aya Space is something I think really needs an update. It's also not easy to add other systems. By default, it reads your emulation station or Pegasus files. I set all of my ROMs up with ESDE, so I already have system files there. If I want to add a new platform, let's say I want to add PlayStation Vita, I'll choose where my ROMs are, which is here, but it tells me I don't have an emulation station list file. Now, I don't know how to make one. I'm going to have to go and check. It's a little bit annoying. So if you're not absolutely set on using this launcher, I mean, it does look really nice, but if you're not really that bothered about it, I would suggest just sticking with something like ESD-E or my personal favorite, Beacon. Once it is all set up, you can choose which RetroArch core or emulator you want to use to play each game, and if you install more emulator apps later, it will automatically be added to the list. So it does work well, it looks great, it's just a bit of a pain to set up. We also have AYANEO's own dedicated settings screen here, which is pretty good. It's quite basic and easy to understand. You're able to run root scripts, you're able to change the fan curves, the screen settings and things like that. Casting settings is what you're going to use to set up an external display, to change the resolution of it once it's connected, and to decide whether you want to see the screen on the Conker while you're playing, or whether you want to turn the screen off when you connect an external monitor. All of those kinds of controls are here in the AYANEO system settings. We're also able to set up our custom buttons here, like the start and select buttons and the buttons on the back. We have device spoofing to make apps think you're running a Samsung, Xiaomi or other phone, which might help with things like unlocking hidden frame rates and things like that. And here is just where you'll find various ways to update and customize your experience. But the part of the software which truly shines for me is this side panel. You can access almost everything from that previous settings window directly inside here. And it's so easy to bring up while you're playing with this singular button. You can change your performance profile. I generally just keep it on maximum with a 144 Hz refresh rate. But if you want to save some battery life, you can move that frame rate down, put it on automatic. You can lower the performance mode. So I have tried streaming mode when I'm streaming GeForce Now. Eco mode is the extreme battery saving mode. When you turn on eco mode, your frame rate goes from like 100 to about 5. It just really sips power. I'm not sure if you can even do almost any gaming on eco mode, maybe just the really, really small retro games. Because the battery life on this is really good, I generally just keep it on max or gaming and I just have fun. We have our statistics up here as well, and we're able to turn on our performance overlay with this little button, which I find matches the color scheme super nice. Black, white and orange. I love leaving this on all the time, it's so unobtrusive. You can turn on the detailed view to bring up a lot more settings, but that is just way too much information for me when I'm trying to enjoy my games. So I usually keep it on minimal view, and I just leave it at the top of the screen in most of my games. Under controller, we can play around here with our vibration, our triggers, our joystick sensitivity. Here is where you can change the layout from standard or Japanese. But once again, I have configured a button to do that for me, so I don't even need to access this screen anymore. We can set up our start and select buttons correctly, and I highly encourage you to do that. And here is where we can also set the back buttons, these two on the back here, to do something in our games. I play a lot of Battlefield 1, where you need to use the left and right D-pad buttons to switch weapons. But while I'm engaged in a shoot-off, I don't like taking my finger off of the left stick to change weapons. So I've set the left and right D-pad buttons to be the left and right back buttons, so I can freely be switching weapons without moving my hands. We also have gyro aim for certain games, where you can enable the gyroscope by holding down the left trigger or the left bumper. I leave that off because I find games that support the gyroscope, like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, automatically just recognize it anyway with this turned off. And then finally we have turbo mode, if you want to turbo any of your buttons. Device lets us change the screen brightness and volume, nice and easy. We have things like airplane mode, Bluetooth, all the things that you would find on this traditional pull-down notification shade. It's just right here with one little tap and one little toggle. So while you're playing, you can just quickly do all of this with your thumb and then just carry on playing again. We have the RGB light mode, which I've set up here to match the device with this nice cheddar cheese orange. And we have charging mode, where you can set a maximum charge level if, for example, you don't want to charge more than 80% to help preserve the lifespan of your battery. And there is bypass charging mode. So when you plug in a cable while you're playing, it will supply power to power the device, but it will not charge the battery. This is a feature many people loved from previous devices in order to prolong the battery lifespan. So if you see my battery now, rather than charging with 50 watts as it was before, it's only now supplying 2 watts just to keep it ticking along. Finally, we have some quick toggles, once again the kind of thing you can see in the pull down notification shade, but here easily at your fingertip, or thumb tip I suppose. And lastly we have settings where you can jump back into those Aya Neo settings, or you can jump into the full Android system settings. It's all right here and easily accessible. So now how does the Konkr Pocket Fit actually perform? There's no better game to kick off the game testing with than Konker's Pocket Tails, which I believe this handheld is actually named after. I have a lovely bezel on the screen here, and the reason I'm using bezels is because I was worried that we wouldn't be able to blend the black body of the console into the blacks of the actual game, like we can on an OLED. But it turned out they actually blend in seamlessly, so we don't need to use any bezels if we don't want to. It's purely up to you, and in some situations I think bezels look quite nice. And in others, I want to maximize the full size of the display. So you're going to see me using bezels in some of the tests and not in some others, just based on what I think looks nice. So here is some Megadrive or Genesis gameplay, which of course works flawlessly. The best game ever released on Game Boy Advance, of course, being the Zoey 101 video game, or the older, lower-end systems, which we usually think of as being up to around the PlayStation 1, they're all, of course, going to run absolutely flawlessly here, upscaled to 1080p. But it's not just those systems we can upscale to 1080p. We can actually upscale pretty much everything to 1080p. A good way to show you just how well the blacks from this LCD screen blend into the chassis of the device would be James Pond RoboCod, which is an almost entirely black game. Whether it's the black sky behind him or the borders on the side of the screen, it all just blends seamlessly into the console. I'm not sure how well it comes across on the video you're watching now, and if I move the screen around, you might be able to see the edge of the screen and the beginning of the device. But to me, with my naked eyes, head on, I cannot even see where they meet each other, just like with an OLED. That is something I didn't expect from this LCD screen, but that makes me really happy because I don't feel like I'm missing out on not having an OLED like I thought I would before I got it in my hands. Moving on to Dreamcast now, one of my favorite ways to pass the time, Virtua Tennis 2. We have a very easy 60 frames per second here. It's super smooth and a lovely experience. Moving on now to Gamecube, we're playing Ace Golf, also known as Swingers Golf in America. This is the European version of the game, the one that I grew up playing. So this one's locked to 50 frames per second instead of 60, because it's in PAL format instead of NTSC. But again on Gamecube, we have no issues playing at 1080p, 60 frames per second in a variety of games. PSP, unsurprisingly, works very well. I can even hold down the trigger to enable the speed boost and play at a solid 60 frames per second as it blazes through the game. This is a game that just looks wonderful with all the cutscenes being just like the game. It looks so sharp and nice, and a game that I just always keep coming back to. Probably the biggest surprise to me out of all the game systems I've tested on the Konkr Pocket Fit has to be PlayStation Vita. I've been very vocal in the past about how difficult it is to emulate this system, and I even just completely gave up with it in the past. But here it runs flawlessly. Depending on the game, you're going to get 30 or 60 frames per second, depending on how that game was made to run. It's fully supporting the gyroscope built into the Conker as well. It's just running beautifully. In all of my testing over the past week or so on this device, everything's been working so well, except for one system, which is the PlayStation 3. Up until now, I couldn't get a single game to load on PlayStation 3. It was just a black screen. Then just as I sit down to film this review and tell everybody that PS3 for some reason isn't working, I get an update as I film it, which has just completely fixed it. Oh, new update? So I don't have any time to unfortunately put any real testing into this, as I fully expected to tell you guys this wasn't working, but that update that just came right as I sat down to film has got all of the games launching, and in the case of this game, playing at the default 30 frames per second completely fine. This is a game that did play at 30 frames per second on the original, I believe. We've got a smooth 30 frames per second, and we're only using 46% of the CPU and 19% of the GPU, so it seems like we've got a lot of headroom as well. So I'm now going to have to get to doing a lot of PlayStation 3 testing, But due to the fact I didn't get the update until mid-review, I'm not going to be able to include the full result in this video. So I apologize for that, that's just the unfortunate timing. But that's great news! It means we now have every system working well. So as I'm getting my skull bashed in, let's move on to the next system. Here is Nintendo Wii, also at 1080p, just like all of our other systems, running absolutely beautifully. Nintendo DS works well, so I'm able to check my current age. 60! We can also play 3DS upscaled to 1080p, but let's now go into dual screen mode. The Retroid dual screen actually just about tightly fits onto the Conker and is able to close almost perfectly over the screen, which is a little bit at the bottom there. But unfortunately, Retroid haven't released the software fix for this yet. It only works with Retroid devices and I believe AYN devices as well. I couldn't find a way to get it working with the Conker, and in trying to do so, I actually messed my software up a little bit, so I wouldn't recommend doing anything until Retroid actually released some kind of fix for this. So as we cannot use the Retroid dual screen, let's instead use the Ryan Retro dual screen. I had both 3DS and Wii U working really nicely with two screens here. You can have 144Hz on this screen, 180Hz on this screen when you're just browsing around, and then when you play a game you can lock them both to 60. It worked beautifully, but unfortunately I tried flashing a lot of different firmware to get this dual screen working, and I completely broke the external display capabilities. So I'm in contact with the ANEO support team now. We'll see how good their support is, and I'll get back to you if we fix that in a future video. But unfortunately for now, I have completely broken the display capabilities of this by just blindly flashing root script meant for other devices. Completely my fault, I'm an idiot. So let me just show you how it looks on the one screen. Azaha is running beautifully here at 1080p and does support dual screens, so if you don't break your dual screen like I did, then you can run this in dual screen mode, which I really wish I filmed before I started messing around with the firmware. There's also a modified version of Cemu you can download, which allows you to use an external screen for the gamepad. So you can have the gamepad touchscreen down here and the main display on your external monitor. Once again, it works fantastically well. I just unfortunately couldn't record it before I destroyed everything. So please learn from my mistake, although I'm sure you're smarter than me already, and don't just flash random root scripts on your devices. I'm just on Outset Island here, which usually runs smooth on pretty much everything. It's when we get later into the game, into combat, where things start to slow down. On my Retroid Pocket 5, I did notice some slowdowns when panning the screen around like this. Here on the much more powerful Konkr Pocket Fit, I've not noticed any slowdowns yet. The games are running nice and smooth here. Even when compiling shaders, I'm not really noticing any slowdowns. We're getting a smooth 60 frames per second in this game, and 30 frames per second in the previous one, which is what they were made to run at. So once again, another system at 1080p that's running beautifully. Next up we have the Nintendo Switch, another device that's been running beautifully on here. I actually got offered this device by ANEO the exact same day my Nintendo Switch battery died. It feels like destiny, because this has been a beautiful substitute for my Nintendo Switch while I save up my pennies for a Nintendo Switch 2. All of the lightweight games here, like Alex Kidd, Animal Crossing, Bear and Breakfast, they're all going to run flawlessly on here. But in actual fact, pretty much every game runs flawlessly on here. Only the absolute most difficult, most demanding games are going to cause you any real concern. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is a game that I've really struggled to get running on my previous tests on other systems. Here on the Konkr Pocket Fit, we're at a pretty solidly locked on 30 frames per second. There will be some occasional dips when we load in new towns and new areas, but for the most part we do have a solid 30 frames per second even at 1080p. And we're able to maintain that 30 frames per second even when taking off the fiercest of foes. Come here, peasant. With little Prince Boy, Exhale of the Crazy, we're easily getting a locked on 30 frames per second at 1080p here. We do have these slight line glitches through the screen, which I've had in various situations before, so a different driver might be necessary. But for pretty much all of the tests today, we're going to be using the same driver to keep things nice and simple, which is the Mr. Purple T22 driver, and it's working beautifully in pretty much every situation. There's no way we can get this game to drop below 30. So let's see how much further than 30 we can take this game and others by turning off the speed limit inside Eden, which will let the games run above 30 or 60 frames per second that they'd usually be tied to. The Breath of the Wild is getting around 40 frames per second here at 1080p. Animal Crossing New Horizons is running at above 50 frames per second, which causes it to run in fast motion. There are some FPS unlock mods you can get for certain games that lets you run above the native resolution without increasing the speed, and that's something I will be covering in a video coming soon. And really light titles like Tennis in the Face will just run well over 100 frames per second. One game I've never been able to emulate well before is the Little Prince Boy Cries of the Monarchy. Here with the unlocked frame rate, we're actually getting over 40 frames per second at 1080p. There are the occasional glitches on the ground. You'll see these black squares appear like this, which is quite common when emulating this game. I haven't yet found a fix for that, but if I do, I'll be sure to let you guys know and put it in my compatibility reports on my website as well. But getting above 40 frames per second on this is really impressive. We are just in the beginning zone, but I've never managed to get anywhere near this before. This game is very finicky and picky with drivers, so for all the other tests on the Switch today, I've been using the T22 Mr. Purple driver, but this one didn't like that. On my other consoles, this one usually doesn't like any turnip driver. However, I did get it working with the turnip driver 25.3.0 revision 9, which at the time of testing the games was the newest one available. And that's also the same driver I've used for all of my Windows PC gaming tests, so that perfectly segues us into Windows gaming. Here on GameHub, I've connected my Steam account and installed quite a few of my Steam games from my library to test out, and it's actually been working so well, I bought around 5 to 10 new Steam titles just in the last week to see if I could get them working or not. I just realized all of those Switch tests I showed you were in gaming mode and not in max mode, so we might even be able to eke out a little bit more performance. Here in GameHub, we're playing Skyrim, always a good place to start with our tests. I'm not quite sure why we have two different HUDs on the screen that are giving two different frame rate results, but it seems like we are easily getting around 50 to 60 frames per second without any tinkering whatsoever, just installing the game and playing it, and it seems to be running nice and smooth to me. Let's see if we can find some baddies. I think this treasure right out in the open seems like a good spot to attract some. Here they are. Good morning and good night. Everything's running nice and smooth. If I stare at the frame rate counter, I do notice it dropped down to around 40 to 45 frames per second. While I was actually just in the action, not staring at the frame rate counter, it felt perfectly smooth. I did play this for about 30 minutes a few days ago, and the whole way it felt nice and smooth. And I'm just realizing now that I've taken an arrow to the shoulder. BioShock Infinite also runs really nicely on here. We don't always get a permanently locked on 60 frames per second. We are mostly getting a pretty solid 60 frames per second, except when more action is happening, it is falling down a little bit, but not too low. I also ran the benchmark test on Tomb Raider and got a really great result. So anything from that kind of era like BioShock Infinite, Skyrim, and Tomb Raider are going to run really nicely here. Newer, more demanding games are going to be a little bit more of a struggle, of course, when we're emulating a Windows experience. But if you're sticking to the more simplistic games like Stardew Valley, Slay the Spire, which are the ones I like anyway, you're going to have a fantastic experience here. When playing point-and-click games, you can of course use the screen as a touchpad in GameHub, but ANEO do actually include a keyboard and mouse mode you can toggle on with a hotkey. So if we toggle that on now with the hotkey I chose, we can use the left stick to move the mouse and the buttons to click the mouse, but I find this to be less convenient than just using the screen, which is far smoother and easier to use. So this mouse and keyboard mode is something I wouldn't really recommend unless you're using an app that doesn't support the touchscreen mouse, and you just have no other choice. I would really see this as a last resort, rather than something that would be nice to use, like the touchpad on a Steam Deck, for example. So while playing games directly in GameHub or Winlater is fantastic, probably my favorite use for this device of all is streaming. I'm using GeForce Now here. You can of course also stream your own library from your computer, PlayStation, Xbox, etc. as well. I don't own any of those devices at the moment, unfortunately, but GeForce Now streaming on here is the best streaming experience I've had by a mile. I thought the Portal would be really good for this when I bought it, but for some reason the internet connection on my Portal is just terrible. I'm not sure whether I got a lemon or that's just how it is, but the internet connection on this is so good, and we also have a 144Hz screen. So if you pay for the ultimate tier of GeForce Now, like I do, you can play games up to 144Hz. Here I'm playing Battlefield 1 at 120 frames per second, which is what it maxes out on GeForce Now. Some games do support 240, a lot of them are locked at 120, and here, because we have 120 Hz and more on this screen, it is a beautiful experience. It is the best experience I've had playing this game so far. When I tried to play this game on other handhelds like the Odin 2 Portal and the Retroid Pocket 5, they do occasionally slow down and lose quality and buffer because of the connection, whereas on here that has not happened to me even once. I'm not sure what makes this so solid for streaming. I can only assume it has a really good Wi-Fi chip inside. Oh, I hit that guy? Usually when I play this on my little devices like the Retroid Pocket 5, I'm just playing for fun and I don't expect to do very well. But when I've been playing on here, it's so solid and smooth and the controls are so great. I've been wiping out squads and playing really well, better than ever before. So I can highly recommend this device if you'd like to use it for streaming. And being an Android device, we of course have to look at native Android games as well. Genshin Impact looks fantastic on this screen and runs at a solid 60 frames per second with all of the graphic settings set to the maximum. It's a wonderful experience that runs beautifully smooth. Balatro, running at 4 times speed, is also beautifully smooth on this screen as well. It's not a game I even considered when thinking about smooth gameplay, but with the speed cranked up to maximum, it's so lovely and smooth. Minecraft, through Pojav Launcher, we can set the graphics to fancy, the render distance all the way up to 16 chunks and unlock the frame rate, and we are easily hitting our 144 frames per second to get the most out of this screen. Even as we look right into the distance and spin around, we easily get well over 100 frames per second and usually over 200. So let's now talk about the price and the availability. Right now it's available on Indiegogo with a base price of $239, only $20 more than the Retroid Pocket 5, which is just incredible considering the extra power. YuGiOh have announced they are extending this super early bird pricing all the way until the end of the campaign as well. So as long as you buy one before the campaign is over, you're going to lock in these excellent prices, which is possibly the best deal in handheld gaming right now. When I first started this YouTube channel about 11 months ago, I started with the Retroid Pocket 5, and I've been recommending this to everyone. I've not had another device since then that I can just overwhelmingly recommend to everybody, until now. This is basically exactly what I wanted a Retroid Pocket 6 to be. The left analog stick on top, way more power, and at a comparable price. The Retroid Pocket 5 comes in at $219. Once you add a case to that, you're looking at around $235. Base model Konkr Pocket Fit is about $230. So you're looking at a $5 difference once you add the grip to this, or around $20 without, for way more power. Not to mention better ergonomics, better speakers, 144 Hz refresh rate. There's just so many benefits here. This is the first Android handheld I've had so far where I feel confident every game is probably just going to work. Do you remember that 2008 Prince of Persia game? It just randomly came into my head the other day, and I thought, I bet I could play this on my Conker. So I picked it up on Good Old Games for $2, downloaded it, installed it, and within an hour, I'm playing it on Winlater. I'm so used to thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I could play that game, if I tinker with the settings and play around with it a little bit, maybe I can get it working. But with the Konkr Pocket Fit, I'm just thinking, let's play that game. Thank you for watching, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a lovely day.